Good afternoon. My name is Jim Broadhurst. I'm the product owner for our Compliance Event Manager product. I'm going to be talking about insider threat prevention, and at the end we may talk a little about Compliance Event Manager, but I want to put the focus on the insider threat detection, insider threats, black hat hacking techniques, and how you protect against insider threats. So if we get to the second half of the PowerPoint, that's good. If we spend all our time in the first half, that would be great, because there's a lot of cool stuff to talk about. So let's talk about what are insider threats. Maybe start with an exercise. Look around you and see if you can identify. I see one gentleman right there. So, types of insider threats. You have the malicious user, somebody with bad intent that may want to copy data, sell it. Second streaming, I guess, is the new term that I've just learned about. So that's probably the biggest area of concern, is that the inside user stealing sensitive data to maybe sell on the black market or what have you. Also, you have well-intentioned employees that might make a mistake. That's also considered an insider threat, because they may make a mistake to open up your system so that you're vulnerable. And then, of course, lost credentials, social engineering techniques that people use to gain credentials so that they can get on your system and perhaps get on your system as a privileged user. So that's another type of insider threat. Are you guys aware of the amount of time, the average amount of time for the mainframe breaches that have occurred, the average amount of time that the person was on the system? What do you guys think that is? Like a couple hours, a couple days? 100 days. So they may be setting things up to get to the point where they can get to what they want to get to. All right, this is my passion area. So a little bit about myself. I am a reformed, privileged user, abuser. Ron Colmoni here taught me most of what I know. So in my younger days, this is well-intentioned. This would be more white hat hacking. When I needed access to a data set, I'd put in the ticket for the security administrators to make the necessary updates so that I could get authorities. But if I didn't have time to wait, I would flip my AC priv bit and get to what I needed to get my job done. And I was actually scolded by the head of the data center. Don't flip your AC priv bit again. So the next time I needed access to a data set and I didn't have time to wait for the ticket, I set my ASXB user and my AC user to the ID of the head of the data center. So I have matured. Like I said, I consider myself a reformed, privileged user abuser. But one of the most interesting things that happened in my career was dealing with the aftermath of a penetration tester and the results that they found. And I believe Ron was on that committee as well. But it was amazing the types of things that a penetration tester can find. And I'll give you one example of a vulnerability that the penetration tester found. There was authorized code that was being passed a DCB as a parameter. The DCB was in key 8 storage. So I know this is a bit dated, as IBM has made gradual incremental improvements to the operating system to close the window for such types of things, but this is a good example to illustrate the point. So the penetration tester noticed this, so he called the authorized code. He was not authorized. He didn't have the ability to update APF libraries, but he passed a dummy DCB. What's in a DCB? Pointer to an I/O routine. So his dummy DCB pointed to his own code. So as a result, he now is running authorized. When you're running authorized, you have the keys to the kingdom. You can do anything you want. So it's, of course, critical that you really lock down the APF list and who has authority to update that. But also, this example illustrates the importance of not only doing that, but being aware that you have the situation where somebody who doesn't have that authority could still get the ability to run authorized by exploiting such a vulnerability. So, what are you? Any of you guys familiar with the various techniques that you could use to bypass security once you're running in an authorized state? Okay, so my favorites were flipping the AC priv bit. There's also, this one goes way back, the JSCB pass. Now normally the JSCB pass is a bit that's set by the operating system when you have a no pass PPT entry. That would be an sys1 parmlib member, a sketch, like sketch XX. But it's just a bit, right? So if you're somebody who's a black hat hacker and your intent is to steal sensitive data, that's one of many techniques that you can use. You flip that bit. It's really simple if you can get authorized. Are you guys familiar with the new bypass authority parameter that's come out with ZOS 2.2? How many are not familiar with that? Excuse me. So IBM is doing a really good job of just continuously closing the window for such abusive techniques. The bypass auth option is a parameter that you specify on the DCBE when you open a data set. The intent is to stop the usage of the ACE priv bit and the JSCB pass bit. So it's going to obviously take a long time before you get to the point where the ASC priv bit is no longer flipped by certain code, JSCB pass, legitimate code. But for a black hat hacker, it's even easier to just put that parameter on your DCB than to flip the bit. So have you guys heard of the Soldier of Fortran? Yeah, Google Soldier of Fortran mainframe hacking. You'll get some very interesting information on how a mainframe was hacked at a bank and more good information. So what some of the hackers do is they have a little, there's this thing called I think it's Hercules that you could put on your PC. It's a very old version of MVS, but you could on your Hercules system, and this was done, I'm not making this up, you could develop all of this kind of code, stage it, get it ready, so that once you have broken into a system, now you've got all your little tools and utilities that you can plug in to start hunting down and locating the sensitive data you want to go after, exploiting penetrations or whatever. When you get to the point where you can run authorized, you could then use these techniques I'm talking about. Now with these techniques, you're not only bypassing the ESM security, but it may not result in a SMF record. You won't get a type 80 or a type 80 would be RACF and TSS, or type 230 SMF record for ACF2. Those won't get cut. So it makes it harder to track down the activity that you performed. So these are the kind of techniques that black hat hackers can use. The other good source of information I found on this is if you Google RSM partners and mainframe hacking, you can get a whole bunch more detail on what I was talking about. It's extremely interesting, and it should be interesting if you're in the security area, because one mainframe breach can be catastrophic. So this obviously isn't going to be a daily thing where somebody's hacking into your system, but these are the kinds of things that you want to really make sure that you're covering so that you don't have holes. So, for example, if you're relying on SMF alone as your source of generating alerts or watching for this type of activity, what if I'm authorized and I just put in an SMF exit? So you really want to make sure that you're watching multiple, it's like a good analogy would be multiple security cameras. You know, it'd be like, you know, with the ESM, it's like locking the front door, okay? It's not enough to have the security rules. You got to make sure you lock the windows. You got to make sure you lock the back door. If necessary, you want to put bars on the windows, and you want to have a good watchdog that's watching everything and barking if something suspicious is going on. And with the insider threat, now we go back to privileged users. So no matter how well you've got your system locked down, if you have no vulnerabilities, you've always got the situation where you've got privileged users. So if you visited the Trusted Access Manager for Z demo ped, that's certainly a good thing to keep that window as close as you can. So the number one audit finding, what do you guys think that is for failed audits? The most common mainframe failed audit finding. Yeah, excessive access to the APF libraries. If you didn't already realize this before I started talking, I hope you realize it now, that there's good reason why you want to keep that as small as possible. And with something like Trusted Access Manager for Z, you can also use the methodology where you elevate the privileges only when needed, and then get, if somebody needs to update the, and add to the APF library or make a change to sys1 parm do that while you've been, while your privileges have been elevated, and then when it's done, go back. But even when you have all of that locked down, rock solid, what about the first insider threat that I talked about? The sysprog who has that authority but has bad intent. And in my past, I had the situation where I worked at a former company where the most trusted sysprog stole confidential information. So, and I didn't touch upon this, but hopefully this is pretty much gone. This was common a while ago, the authorize me routines. Sometimes people would put an SVC in place that would basically you could invoke to authorize yourself. Sometimes that would be just on a test system, and the group that had created such a facility will say, well, this is just a test system, so it's okay if we do this. We're just using this for internal testing. But what if you also have application groups that are copying sensitive data down to that test system, and maybe they don't realize it, and now you've got on this test system someone who has that authorize me routine that they can invoke, use some of the techniques I talked about. So, Before I show the next slide, can you guys tell me what things you would do to protect against the insider threat? Yes, sir. So privileged access, there's a range, right? There's a spectrum. It's not a one or the other. Very good point. Excellent. I'm not sure if you guys, I don't know if I can repeat the whole thing, but part of it was sending such event information to a SIM platform like Splunk. So let's say privileged user for this question would be someone who can update an APF authorized library. That's the most privileged. So what would be things that you would do? What would be things that you would do to protect yourself against that?
We run a scan against APF every night. Anytime a change is made, a scan shows you who made the change.
So that you guys look at your APF list nightly.
We run a scan on it and make sure that nothing's been changed. If it's changed, we have to change it.
Okay, good.
We also limit it by how little qualifier and volume.
So you limit the libraries that can be APF author, certain high-level qualifiers, right? I worked at a former company that did the same. So, yeah, you want to baseline your ZOS system, especially the APF list. Before you baseline it, maybe you use a product like ours, CA Auditor, to go out and look at everything, and you'll probably find things that you really need to change and tighten things up. Once you've got things fairly well tightened up, you want to take a baseline. And you don't necessarily have to be using CA Auditor. That's one good product. Disastigs is another good approach for this.
One of the things I would tell you to make sure you do is make sure you put severe access on the set command. The set command needs to be highly locked.
The set command, excellent.
Otherwise I can do a dynamic APF authorization.
Right. Yeah. So the set prog, like set
Prog equals.
Yeah, to inject an exit, to add to the APF list. Yeah. So if we get into Compliance Event Manager, it's at the end. I can show how it's watching that in 3 different ways.
Because even programs like Sysview will allow you to go in and understand.
Right. Yeah, there's a rack route that's issued. There's a resource behind the ability to issue the set prog. Actually, at the lower level, there's a service that set prog uses that's issuing a rack route. So you want to make sure that that ESM rule is in effect. And then, yeah, we will at the end. Maybe I'll go in a little more detail on that because that's definitely a good example. But this wouldn't be a one-time thing. You would want to just iteratively continue to tighten it up, a rebaseline. But you want to make sure that on a daily basis, don't wait for the night. You want to be monitoring any dynamic changes that can slip through, perhaps by somebody who has been authorized, the privileged user, the inside threat. You want to be monitoring real time for any changes to the ZOS system, to the ESMs, anything that can be changing your security posture. And then, as mentioned, a SIM platform is another approach. You can. How many of you have at your company are using a security operations center? Yeah, definitely a good technique to have a small group of people whose focus is on monitoring not just ZOS but the entire enterprise for suspicious things. They need to be a small group of people that have just the right broad knowledge to be able to watch the whole system. Splunk is one SIM platform that SIM platforms have, the vendors that provide SIM platforms have gone beyond just what a traditional SIM offers, and that they provide they've already got the data to be able to do SIM stuff, to be able to feed a security operations center, set up the dashboards, and you can set up alerts. And actually, we have one of our partners over there, Coralog, that has technology to feed a lot of information into a SIM platform. So that's definitely something to look at. UEBA, so there's UBA, user behavior analytics, and then user entity behavior analytics goes a step further, because you not only have people, users, accessing things, but you have devices or entities. So, and UEBA typically means the injection of machine learning into looking for abnormal user behavior. So this is by no means an exhaustive list, but these are some top items to consider for protecting against the insider threat. So, given time remaining, I'm going to jump ahead of this high-level intro set of slides and look at it from this perspective. So what are all the security events that I should be monitoring? Object access, including object access that's not audited, where someone may have bypassed security. Object access attempts, violations, user activity. And there's two different perspectives to be watching from. One is the data-centric perspective, sensitive data, critical data, monitoring that data, everybody that's accessing that data, but then also monitoring user activities. For if you have someone with elevated privileges, maybe you want to monitor everything that they're doing. Security administration commands, somebody granting UID 0. Changes to the external security manager, control options that could, maybe somebody makes a mistake, like I talked about the well-intentioned employee, insider threat, making a mistake that opens you up to suddenly they make a mistake and your system is now vulnerable. Changes to operating system settings, not only things on disks, sys1.parmlib, etc., but as this gentleman pointed out, dynamic changes via the set command. And this is getting less and less common, but you've still got products that have internal security. With that internal security, sometimes it is used to control privileged abilities. So you want to, if that information, say for example, is in a PDS member, you may want to monitor changes to that PDS member so that you know when changes were made that could affect security, not security that's managed by the ESM, but internal security. Don't forget that. So what are the actions to take for security events? You may want to log all of the activity. You may need to for compliance purposes so that you have forensics so that you could go back. If something suspicious did happen, you want to be able to have that trail of everything that happened. And you want to make sure that that trail includes events that weren't normally audited or written to SMF. You may want to generate real-time alerts for certain things that are highly suspicious. If you have time and you want to stop over there, I can show you a quick demo of a little program that's bypassing security and generating a real-time alert, and I could show you how that was set up. And again, we talked about forwarding event information to a SIM platform. So, real quick, the role of a SIM platform, for those that weren't familiar with it or haven't thought about this, allows deeper insights into security exposures. It allows you to do analytics. It provides correlation capabilities, aggregating. You can set up alerts, for example, in Splunk that are based on thresholds. It's extremely powerful and generic. And as I mentioned already, it can facilitate building a SOC, Security Operations Center. And most importantly, it's integrating mainframe event information with information across the enterprise. I think I covered the importance of real-time alerting sufficiently. And of course, when you want a product or tools, products maybe, so that you can keep your costs of doing all the monitoring that you need to do, keep that down. Some customers have the full-time staff trying to develop their own in-house tools for doing what needs to be done.